Welcome back to the Oberlin Executive Speaker Series. This series is dedicated to you special OBs out there. This series brought forth is to help us talk about how we're going to make the world better using business in a positive, sustainable, respectable way. My name is Doug Younger. I'm a professor of, that would be Bussy 118. And, to my 118ers, a big shout out. And I'm here on campus, and this is near the end of our series. And today we're talking about a really important point. Fundraise every day of your life. That's not just for your company. I'm talking about for your own personal financial life, for your families, and for those in your community. This is a tough, difficult topic for some that, some think that money or banks or investors could be a bad thing. But like any tool, if you know how to use it, it can actually enhance and grow your life. So today, with that topic in mind, I thought it'd be better, instead of describing what an investor is or what a venture capitalist is. We started last week with an angel investor. This week, we're starting with a venture capitalist, but a special one, because Glenn Davis is not just an exceptional investor. He's a corporate executive. He's my friend. And he is also a mentor to many young people coming up in corporations, motorcyclists, cyclists, and father humanitarian. Glenn Davis, welcome to the Oberlin Executive Speaker Series.
Well, thank you very much, Douglas, for that very kind introduction. I feel I've really, that's a large number of shoes to fit into. And great to see you guys. So you can wave in the audience, all right? So I just want to make sure, that's great. Okay, cool. Excellent. And that person up the back who's got the coffee, I want them to wave too as well.
That's a 118er, Glenn. That's a specialist, one of my students.
Yeah, come on, you've got to wave to me just to make sure. Okay, I know you're putting your bag down. Fantastic. Cool. So I hope, today I'd really like you to ask me questions. I'd like this to be an engaging discussion with you, I think. It's my pleasure to be here.
So Glenn, let's first start with, it's been a journey, quite literally, for you, in that you have international origins. And I don't just mean, the Australian in you. I mean, you're really a man of the world. So maybe we could start with that a little bit, where you're from, all the places you've lived and traveled and worked.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so I grew up in Australia. As you know, that's from the deep south. And I think I always felt that I wanted to do something. And I think most Australians, my parents actually, they were immigrants from the UK. My father worked on rockets, missile guidance, back in the 50s. And so the pair of them immigrated to Australia. And that was a journey in itself. I think that was back when you actually jumped on a boat. And I think 3 months later, you finally got here. And as part of that, I always remember as a child growing up, they would show me 35mm slides. So I really feel like I'm talking like a real boomer now, but I promise I'm not. But, we would sit in the living room. I was always happy to actually use the slide projector. Anyone in the room has seen a slide projector? Yeah, I thought I was dating myself. It's more like a museum piece. But they would show me the pictures of their travels. So when they were in the Maasai warriors in Africa, journeys around the coast through Europe and through Asia. And so I was always fascinated, growing up to travel. So I did my postgraduate studies in medical ultrasound. And then I worked clinically in a public hospital in Adelaide, South Australia. You can look that up on a map. It's probably as far away as you can be aside from Antarctica. And then actually worked in the private healthcare system. But I always grew up with that sense of wanderlust, where can I go? So after working in Australia, really a couple of years after graduation, I worked for a US company based in Silicon Valley. And I think from a career standpoint, I was always trying to plot where do I need to be in the next 3 years? So what role should I be in now that 3 to 5 years would enable me to continue to progress on that journey of, I suppose, escalating responsibility and also, I think, larger opportunities. So that enabled me to, I went to London. So I lived in London with my, at that time, one child, my daughter, and I was looking after marketing for all of Europe. So I was on a plane every week or driving around Europe. And that was a phenomenal opportunity of really how to talk technology. And this was a medical device with a company called Accusson. And I think what also taught me the lesson of how people use technology in healthcare. It's not enough just to have features and benefits. I think you also have to understand how technology is being used. So started off in London. Then I had an opportunity because no one was mad enough to go to Singapore. So I moved my family to Singapore. We had 2 more daughters. So now we've got a tribe of 3 children living in Singapore. That was wild travel. I don't know. Have any of you been to, like the Philippines or Indonesia or Jakarta? And how about in the room there?
Not in the room, Glenn, but I know in my class I have quite a few international students.
Yeah.
So
So that's always, I think that's a different experience because then I was dealing with distributors. So both direct sales as well as indirect. And then along that journey, I had an opportunity to come and go to Japan. So I was country manager of Japan and for ultrasound. And that was a thrill. I speak Japanese,少し日本語を話します. And that was a lifelong, I think, goal to live there for 3 years. And then finally, cut long story short, I ended up relocating to the US. So, but that was both East Coast and now I'm on the West Coast. So it was quite a journey as far as thinking about where did you want to be. And so now we have 5 daughters, and they've equally inherited that wanderlust, where one of my eldest is now in Vietnam working with the Australian Embassy, and another one of my daughters has just come back from after being in Europe for about 9 months. So I do feel I've inherited a travel gene. Okay.
Yeah, fantastic, Glenn. And I think that first starting off, I know we're going to talk about financials, fundraising, investing, but the truth is the real reason for it, what Glenn is indicating, is multi-generational wealth. I can tell you right now, the steps that you're taking need to be stepwise progressions towards what you want in life, as Glenn had indicated, moving upward. And longer term, you need to save your money now because, years ago, Glenn and I were at university just like you. Time brings about a lot of change. So Glenn, let's jump into a little bit. When thinking about preparing for investing for your life, I think your perspective would be interesting because you've invested not just in business, but I mean, you're also a real estate investor and you've done other things. So how did you think about money as you were, starting your career, and how has that evolved over time?
That's a really good question, I think, and obviously everyone's personal. I think observing, what your friends do, I think is very influential, particularly when you're, at university. I have a love of all things with wheels, hence you can see the bicycles. There's one here. I'm not even going to show you the other side of the room. But I've always had a passion for, I think when it comes to investing, is invest in things and I think that that's very sometimes overlooked by hype or what other people are doing. But I think if you start to understand a business, and you're interacting with them, you know, if we're talking about publicly traded stock, then if you know them and you interact with them, you're also probably more of a bellwether of understanding of, are they going well? So for an example, I think, you know, it's pretty easy to, I mean, we live here in California. It's very easy to see the adoption early on of, you know, electric cars. That was, you know, now 50% of all new cars are electric or hybrid here in California. So it was very easy to see, you know, that early wave with Tesla when they first started coming out because of the sheer volume of cars you'd see on a daily basis. If you think of Whole Foods, that's probably another example. You saw how there was a niche and a growing niche for people who were prepared to pay a little bit of a premium, and in some cases exactly the same dollar value for an item, because it was either fresher, or they had more selection, or it was more multicultural in nature versus a traditional supermarket. So I think that's one thing. If you know, I don't proclaim to be any wizard, but I do think that you need, you know, the one thing I've learned is invest in things you know. If you don't know them, you know, you should find out about them before you just blindly follow someone else's recommendation. I think that's the only time I've really lost money, when someone said, "Oh, this is a great idea," and of course it wasn't. I think the other aspect, I think, is, you know, what I've seen in living in different countries is, I think what it has taught me is, you know, certainly when it comes to housing, and I know at the moment we're at a very difficult point with very high interest rates and, you know, an affordability index that is almost impossible. But looking back, you know, you know, you can see it was in some ways just as painful. The first house I actually bought in Adelaide, I think my mortgage was 13.5%, and that sounds ridiculous now. Like, who the hell why would you even do that? But that was what it was. But, you know, mind you, now the house, you know, we'd since sold it, you know, 20 odd years, 30 years ago. But what's interesting is, you know, once you're in the market, there's certainly no doubt that it does give you, you know, some traction. And the idea is try and find the places when it's either the house that no one wants to buy, or but it's in a very good area. I mean, these are long-standing, I think, you know, traditions.
Yeah, this is great, Glenn. And just to share my own personal experience, building on what Glenn had said, investing in things you know, even things that are your hobbies, can pay off. When I was actually getting my graduate degree at Case Western, that was the time where the Google auction came. And as well as I was a big comic book reader growing up, and I invested in a little stock, which was Marvel, which you could imagine later on has really boomed and became in Disney and so forth. So I agree with Glenn, exposing yourself to things that you enjoy. I'm sure a lot of you have hobbies, or you like outdoor camping, so like REI, and, you know, trying to find investment opportunities around the things that you ordinarily do. I think it's a really solid point. And then in terms of real estate investing, you know, I don't know, Glenn. I always admired you, and we'll talk a little bit about my origins with Glenn. But I bought my first house. It was in California, and for me as a Clevelander, it wasn't just an investment. It was like legacy to me. It was a part of pride to be able to do something like that. And I think that that's another thing I can comment about when you make investments. It should really reflect your own values and your legacy and, you know, future things. So, Glenn, if you don't mind, like, maybe we should talk a little bit about, in terms of the investments, like you mentioned in healthcare technology, what do you view as like things that are exciting you these days? Or what are some investments that you've made or seen that, you know, really got you excited or exhilarated?
Yeah, I think, you know, and to put it in perspective, I've been very fortunate that I've had a lot of experiences in different, I suppose, areas of the hospital. So having lived and worked, in a hospital. So been in intensive care, used to work in there, the ER on the weekends and nights, and clinics during the day. I think it gave me a very good insight into patient care. What happens when a patient goes to hospital? What are the doctors and nurses? How are they interacting? And what's important to clinicians and also life in a hospital? So that was really excellent grounding. And again, talk about what you know, which I grew to understand both medical devices and healthcare as a whole. So when it comes to, a Niterra, so we run a corporate or CVC or corporate venture fund in conjunction with a group called Pegasus Health Tech. They're out of San Jose. We've got around about $100 million that we're trying to divest over a 5-year period. So we're very much focused on healthcare. There's a mobility and energy. Since I joined Niterra, and we're a global company based in Japan, I would probably say 99% of our investments have been healthcare related. And that's been really driven by myself and the team that I work with. Tom Clues is excellent in looking at what are the opportunities in healthcare. So we're very much focused on how can we help people spend more time living. I really think this is probably the largest trend that we're going to see in healthcare over the next 10 to 15 years. And so as an example of this, we've focused on our recent investments called VivaLink. They're a Los Gatos-based startup. They've got a focus on telemedicine and personalized care management. Last year, we also invested in a German company called Neoplasmed. They've developed cold plasma device for looking at advanced wound care. And I think wound care is really quite significant. There's not a lot of advancements have been made in the last 40 years. So people, you can have these individuals who develop, if they've got diabetes and they develop foot ulcers or other chronic wounds due to lack of perfusion, and then these are debilitating. So this means the difference between, say, your grandfather being able to walk around the yard or go down to his neighbor by himself independently, or being really curtailed to his house because he can't move. And I think one of the big things that affects, patients' quality of life is mobility. We should never underestimate that. If you stay mobile, you stay healthy. Once you stop moving, that's not a good sign. And you see that with a lot of, elderly care. So for us, we're trying to pick on things that, selectively, we're trying to find a natural fit with our healthcare strategy. We look at small startups. So typically we're looking at investing somewhere between, writing checks between 3 and 5 million, typically. I'm very proud of our team's passion and determination to think, how can we make a difference? Because at the end of the day, that's what you're here for. I mean, you're here at the college, you're at university, you're here to make a difference. So, I think I think that passion has, ideally you're in an opportunity, or you're fortunate enough that you can bring that passion to play.
Yeah, appreciate you sharing, Glenn. And there's a lot to unpack on this. I'm going to try to take a look at this from a lens of someone that's a student. One, for you to represent an international fund that's $100 million. First of all, it's incredible. But secondly, to hear you talk about passion and empathy and making a difference, I just don't think that that's necessarily how investors are characterized, right? Like people will always think that investors, like, they're going to bleed you dry, or, there's a lack of trust, or so maybe we can talk a little bit about that, which I think is kind of the devil's advocate here. Why do you think that's just so much misunderstanding as to what an investor is? And people have anxiety about getting in front of somebody like you, which it's interesting to me because I have no anxiety about getting in front of
No,
you.
no, no. I mean, um, I think, you know, generally, if you have a look and, I mean, JP Morgan's probably the largest healthcare global sort of investing conference that happens in Silicon Valley, in San Francisco every year. And it's an amazing experience because you do meet with different funds. And earlier this year, we met with numerous sort of different funds who have different objectives. I like to think, you know, majority of them are really trying to leverage their capital. And obviously they have, you know, predefined return rates of investment. You know, they want to see, you know, some funds are looking for, you know, 5 to 10 times return on their invested capital. Others are quite happy. Look, if I can get a 4 times exit, I'm happy as Larry. Other people like to churn quickly, and others also take a long-term view. So I think the long-term view people who are trying to say, well, look, I'm in here to make a meaningful difference to be able to get this company to where I believe they're either so sustainable, profitable, or they're going to be able to look at different forms of exits. So that's whether they're acquired or whether they'll just continually be privately held, or whether they exit through SPACs or IPOs onto the stock market. But I think, you know, fundamentally though, it's actually a partnership. That's what an investor is. They're a partner. They have capital, but I often hear the term, I don't want just money. I don't want dumb money. What I think a lot of startups look for, and this is what I think we try to aim for. We like to be smart. So we're here to help you partner. So we're not only investing, but we're also putting our resources to the table. We're trying to partner with you so we can look at, are there any opportunities that we can help? Are there other commercial partnerships that could be brought to the table or expanded? And how do we help you grow, both technically or commercially? And I think that's the fun thing, because then I think it truly is a win-win situation for all parties concerned. So I think that's our aim is how can we find people with a natural fit who bring, you know, specific key differentiatable technologies with good solid intellectual property, and then how can we help with the global infrastructure we have and a team and bring a passion to the table? I think that's the really fun part. That's what I love. I love partnering with a startup to say, how can I help you? What can we do? And sometimes you don't need to help them. Sometimes they're just, you know, it's always that balance.
If you don't mind me asking, I think you have a unique perspective as an investor because you've also worked in startups yourself. And has your perspective on what investing is changed after you've now gone on the other side of the line, right? Like, because
yeah, that was very interesting. So I've been fortunate to be in several startups, and the last one was acquired by GE Healthcare. What's really quite interesting is being on both sides of the table, because I think you know what you're looking for. And I think what I was always impressed with was if we had an investor who just generally wanted to help you succeed. There was no, I mean, inherently they've invested in you, and they've invested in you usually because they've seen a passion, a commitment, and, you know, and your determination. That, you know, I'm that kind of like singly focused, I'm going to do this. And I think that's really critical. And then similarly, I think we've had some extraordinary experiences where, you know, they would help you with a clinical trial, they would help you through recruitment, and in some instances, this is on the other side of the planet. I mean, there was no need for them to do this. They went above and beyond, and I think that's what I appreciated. So I suppose I'm always trying to look and focus our organization. How can we be the best partner to you? Even if we're the smallest investor, if I can be the best partner, then I think that's how you build a reputation, and I think that's how you can contribute to someone's success. Because if they're successful at the end of the day, so are you. So I'm very much, I do have a inherently karmic belief. You know.
Yeah, that's great, Glenn. Now, one of the things I do want to talk about that, this series has been going on now for a while now. We've had over 10 guests. One of them was a female entrepreneur, and she had shared a statistic that in the venture capital community, less than 5% of investment went to female-led businesses and minority created businesses. And, I think that may be contributing to some of the lack of trust that some had. If you had any thoughts or perspectives as to what's happening there, and like how can we shift or change that trend?
Yeah, actually, I was on the I was chairman of a non-profit in New York, and we were dedicated. It was Her Health EQ. You can find them. Marissa Thayer was the person who started this non-profit, dedicated to really bringing women's health and also healthcare startups by women. How can you reinforce that? And she's gone on. She's the CEO of an AI company currently at the moment, and has led an amazing journey at the moment in influencing more women to create startups and to also support them. And it's probably that latter aspect. So Marissa Thayer, afterwards I can pop you a link to some of her activities. She's just unbelievable in the journey that she's been able to get funding and create programs in particularly in the third world to improve care, like ultrasound and breast care, etc. But I think the answer to your question is, for us, in fact, the CEO of our cold plasma investment in Germany is a woman. I think she's amazing, Ulrika Sailer. I think she's, incredibly dynamic. She's passionate. She's determined. So
Actually,
I suppose, yeah.
actually meet her at a Venture Lab.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose for me, I'm probably biased. I've got 5 daughters. So for me, I've always been focused on how it's the individual. And I think as a father and certainly a husband, I think the more we can do to encourage our daughters that there is no limit to their capability. I think it does start at the home, frankly. And but also I think it, obviously some societies are more open than other. That's why I do love Silicon Valley, because I think it is a very broad-minded society and culture here. It's very competitive though, so there's no doubt about that. But I think it's up to us as individuals. We can make a difference individually of how we relate to people. Yeah.
This is great, Glenn. And I have to self-disclose to everyone. We've talked in past weeks of the importance of having a mentor and a sponsor. And to self-disclose, I have to say, a lot of you don't know, this is probably more than 14 years ago. I met Glenn at an organization, and I was recruited by Glenn to work for him. And Glenn is the one that brought me to California. He's the one that gave me a job. He's the one that, what I've noticed time and time again as my career moves on, I believe Glenn is the definition of a sponsor for me personally. And Glenn, I'm curious for you, like you've now seen me kind of grow and get married. Glenn was at my wedding. A lot of you don't know that. I was, my wife is Gujarati Indian and Hindu, and I had 500 attendees at my wedding, and Glenn was one of them.
I love you coming in on the motorcycle. That was the coolest thing, frankly.
But what you can see is it's not just an investor in money, it's an investor in people. And I'm curious, Glenn, what was your views? Like, you've seen me become an entrepreneur, like, how do you, did this investment go the way you thought, or?
You know, I couldn't be more happier internally and prouder of sometimes you can make a difference. And I don't mean, you know, one of the things I've learned is I always remember I was in a clinical environment, so I'm working clinically. And I wanted to move in the commercial world. So this was one of those pivotal life moments where I didn't really want to continue to work in a hospital. I thought there was more to life outside the four walls of the hospital. And I wanted to join this commercial company called Accusson. They were pre-IPO back then. They were based in California, Mountain View. For me, it was the prospect of maybe international travel one day. And at the time, the sort of the managing director of Australia, I didn't fit into all the buckets that he wanted. You know, I didn't have any commercial experience, zero. I worked in a hospital, and you know, generally speaking, people either adapt to the commercial world or they just don't. But he gave me a chance. His name was Carlos Faustman, and I'll always be forever grateful to Carlos because he took a he believed or saw something in me that would enable me to thrive. And I think that lesson that I felt personally in my career, I've always felt I also want to give people, if there's an opportunity where I feel there's something unique, and Douglas, I think you're the perfect example of uniqueness and passion and knowledge and drive and charisma and very entrepreneurial spirit. It was just a no-brainer. It's like, of course, I could just see a natural fit where I think that I could see synergy with us working together, which has been proven to be true over many, many years. So for me, that what I learned in my career, I've just applied on a basis of, you know, of now and again, I see something, and maybe it's not obvious to other people, or I don't think I have any. I like to give people an opportunity, like I was given an opportunity. That's probably how I'd preface it.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Glenn. You know, much love to you, my friend.
But I think I will say this. I don't know, for those of you, there is a TED Talk called by Magnus Walker. He's a bit of a hero for me. He believes in, you know, follow your passion, and that's how success will come. And I certainly believe that 1,000%. So he's my hero.
So moving on, Glenn, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of being an investor. And there's certain hard skills and certain soft skills, as you mentioned, in forming this relationship with who you invest in, your time, money, and effort. Are there any particular, because there may be certain students in the room that are interested one day in becoming investors themselves. Is there any skills in particular that you have found useful as an investor that are either hard or soft in nature?
I think one, for me personally, I think, you know, healthcare is very personal to me. So that's enabled me to be very focused, or I'm always thinking about, if there's a solution or something that you're looking at, how are they focused on the patient? Because at the end of the day, if the technology can help the patient, there's meaningful value proposition. And so that's a personal thing for me. I think I've also, because I've been very fortunate to have lived in 5 different countries, including Japan, I've also got the luxury of a global team. You know, we've got a team based in Tokyo, Nagoya, Berlin, and here in Santa Clara. So that's also given us a good global exposure, because I do believe some areas, like in Europe, is very much prospering because of sort of lower barriers of development. A lot of clinical studies are often done in Europe first. So that can give you exposure to a technology that may 5 years from now come to the US. And I think TAVI is probably a perfect example of that, transaortic valvular replacement. You know, a lot of the early clinical work and and really implementation was in Europe first before it came to the US. And there's a lot of different examples of that. I think the other thing is you have to, Silicon Valley is very unique because, if you look at the number of unicorns, where are they related and where do they come from? Silicon Valley is disproportionate compared to anywhere else in the world. So I think there's a unique culture here of innovation and failing fast. I mean, uniquely, there's not a lot of places in the world where, if you fail, people will still want to talk to you. I mean, I know that sounds funny, but I mean, in some cultures, particularly in Asia, if you fail, that's it. They feel they'll never get anywhere. But I think it's very unique here, and that doesn't necessarily translate outside. So
In fact,
I do,
Glenn, you would agree
yeah,
with me that failing is probably the greatest teacher.
yeah,
You learn more from your failures than a lot of times your successes.
yeah. I think someone said to me, look, they were looking for a CEO, and they said, look, actually, I don't want someone who's only been successful. I actually like someone who's actually failed, because then at least they know what they did wrong, or they've learned from that. So I think in my, if I look at my own career, I've had numerous setbacks, from a regulatory side, product issues, funding disappears, and you have to pivot because the competition's sort of jumped 4 steps ahead of you. But there's a couple of things I'd probably again may be useful. I think number one is never be daunted. I think perseverance is key, and I think that goes without anything in life, and that's business, personal, daily life. You got to persevere. That's all there is to it. There's no such thing as a free lunch. And an Australian Prime Minister once said life wasn't meant to be easy. I do wish it was easier at times, though. So I want to make that. And the other one I think, which I've always been inspired by, is the Nepalese climber, Nimsday. I don't know if any of you have actually watched. There's a Netflix documentary called 14 Peaks. And it's about a Nepalese climber and his team who summited 14 peaks over 8,000 meters. So if you want one of those inspiring documentaries of real life, this is one of those that's, you go, okay, wow, that just shows you what we can accomplish when we have, a really determined mindset and a passion to do something.
Something that is unique to investors is how to manage risk. And you mentioned setbacks, we all have them. But from an investment standpoint, obviously you want to shield yourself by assessing the riskiness of a proposition. Is there any tips and tricks you would share on how you assess risk, even not just as an investor, but also in your own life?
That's a really good question, Douglas. I think everyone has different levels of risk, okay, and risk tolerance, and also different levels of how they can make a decision with high levels of ambiguity. That last aspect is probably something that I think can be innate in people. You can also learn it, but other people they're the ones who, you have a conversation with them and they say, well, what do you think we should do? And there's two opposite ends. There's one who says, I think we need far more detail. I really like to know more detail. I really want to understand better. And then there's the other person who will go, you know what? I think we can just do it. So the difference in personality type, and there's no real right or wrong. Mind you, you do really want to have a CFO who's detailed, I'll tell you that. Wouldn't want the one who goes, let's just go for it. We've seen that too often. But I do think in your decision making and how you calculate risk, it is based on your own personal means of looking at it. But I'll go back to what I started originally. If you have understanding or stay true to your core competency of what you know. That's one way of de-risking, because you know the environment it's worked in, you know how it's being used, you can understand, the ecosystem, or whatever is being put together. The other second one, I think, which is very important, is it's kind of friends and family. I mean, there is such a thing. I think if everyone remembered Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, it's like phone a friend. And I think there are a lot of people who want to help and be successful, and in a lot of ways don't want anything for it. They're happy to be part of that journey. So reach out and find out colleagues you work with, look, you don't necessarily have to be under a non-disclosure if you're not giving something away. If you want to talk detail, then put them under a non-disclosure and seek their advice. So it's seeking advice with experts. It's understanding your own levels of how you deal with ambiguity. And then it's also looking at the larger trends in the marketplace. So I think everyone understands at the moment there's a significant transformation in healthcare from traditional hospital-based model to more services being delivered at the home. Okay, the baby boomers, those that are going to be over the age of 65, will dramatically increase over the next few years in the US. So there's going to be a huge market opportunity for addressing those baby boomers who have wealth, who want to be more independent, and who don't want to do maybe what our grandparents did, automatically go into an elderly care. That's not going to be their thing. They'll have the resources not to do that, and they want to be healthier. They want to continue to do all the thing they want to do. So I think there's going to be this increasing aging population and innovations that tech-enabled services that really benefit both the physicians and the patients. I think that's really quite amazing. For those of you who, an example of that is One Medical, which is really a general. It's taken the family physician and really brought that into the 21st century. So you can get care through your phone. You can book an appointment. They're acquired by Amazon, and I think last year, I think it was almost around Thanksgiving timeframe.
Yep, that's right.
Amazon Prime announced telemedicine available to its Prime members for a very low fee. I mean, who'd ever see that coming? I mean, it would be like saying to your parents, do you believe the person who delivers your parcel will one day offer you clinical medicine services? All right. No one would have ever believed you. They say, why would they do that? They're parcel people. So, the world's changing.
Yeah. Glenn, it wouldn't be a session if I didn't get interactive and start polling and asking questions. So if you don't mind me asking you, I mean, Glenn, you drive Ducati motorcycles. That has to be a self-recognition that you are a risk taker. Would you go as far to say that you?
Well, I think I'd love to be faster. Let me put it that way. Okay, so I would say I am I've been riding a motorcycle. My mum used to take me to school, so let me preface that on the back of a motorcycle. So I did grow up that way, and I've taken all my daughters to school at one time or other on the back of my motorcycle, either kicking or screaming because it made too much noise, and they thought the whole playground. I can remember taking one of my daughters, Hannah, to school on the back of the Ducati, and the whole world the school stopped, and they were going, why is this man taking this, his daughter on the back of that dangerous motorcycle? But
Glenn, I've seen you walk into a very conservative meeting with a motorcycle helmet and full.
Well, yeah, of course. So I think I do love things with wheels. So I must say that I'm passionate about it. So I do like the whole experience of riding motorcycle, and I also cycle quite avidly. So this year I've in fact next month I'm in a 4-day gravel camp to get my sort of performance up, and then I'm gonna go for my gravel race actually in Finland in June. So my wife and I are going to be racing in Finland. I think we've got a 120-kilometer race. Hopefully we'll be okay.
So you do agree then you would fall into the definition of a risk taker?
Yeah.
Whether it's nature
Yeah,
or
I
nurture,
have
I'm
to say
just
that.
saying.
I mean, I think my wife and I, we were cycling at Mammoth, and I think we were descending, and I think we were doing 75 kilometers an hour on a dirt trail, and got down the bottom, looked at each other and thought, that was probably a little bit risky. So I suppose yes.
Okay, and then I'm going somewhere with this, guys. So you also know that many of you in the room, when I was doing my MBA internship in Minnesota, I did what's called accelerated free fall, which means I jumped out of a 13,000 foot drop, non-tethered. I had to train to do it. So I definitely would say that certain behaviors that you already may be exhibiting or thinking about could be an indicator of whether you are a risk taker or not. So I want to ask in this room, are there any of you that would already say you're a risk taker? Okay, there's a lot more. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and then do any of you have any risky hobbies that you're thinking of? Maybe you haven't even done yet. Would you want to skydive? Would you do, how many skateboarders are out there? Yeah, okay. And one thing that you should note that these, if Glenn, this is my thought process here. If you're going to think about a life in entrepreneurism or a life as an investor, partner of such, yes, risk taking is definitely a part of the equation, period. And that there are certain behaviors that you could see personally and look yourself in the mirror whether your risk tolerance, as Glenn had mentioned, would be high enough for a very difficult journey as an entrepreneur. Glenn, you can correct me if I'm wrong by some of this.
No, I mean, I think, you certainly, there's a disproportionate number of males and women, men and women cycling around California, around the Bay Area, descending at 70, 50, 60, 70 miles an hour. And
almost naked, by the way. There's no, you have a helmet and like a,
just dressed in lycra. So, and I think, I know a few friends, who've been, mountain climbers or surfers or kiteboarding. My boss is a kiteboarder. So,
any of you mountain climbers?
and mountain biking. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty wild. And a lot of, I think it's a balance risk. I think just jumping a motorcycle won't make you an entrepreneur, but I think, but I do think there's probably it's a mindset, and I still believe it's that, never be daunted, and a passion for life. I think where I see people struggle sometimes is they're not really cut out for the level of ambiguity. And they're overwhelmed by worry and concern, and they're I do see that from time to time. You feel like going, this is really not, you're not comfortable with this, you probably shouldn't do it, but you could do something else that'd be equally rewarding and advantageous. And so you got to find something that makes you happy at the end of the day. I mean, frankly speaking, life's too short to be miserable. So, but that's up to us individually. No one can hand that to you on a plate. I think, that's something you have to work out. And it's a journey. Okay. So I always consider it's works in progress. Hopefully when I grow up one day, I know what I want to do. That's how I describe it.
One thing I want to mention to the rest of you that didn't raise your hand as risk takers. Okay. First of all, the journey to entrepreneurism or to an investor, it's different for everybody. There's twists and turns in life. You may later on develop certain risky tendencies like midlife crisis. But I will say this though, that try to find it in your heart to find some understanding for those that are the risk takers. Because I can tell you, there's no risk without reward. Many of those individuals that are risk takers need as he mentioned about the CFO, we need the skills of those that are risk averse to balance us out. And I think that many of people think that, you know, to be an entrepreneur, it's only for like the bold and the you know, the wickedly risk, you know, tolerant people. But it's about surrounding themselves with people that maybe aren't risk takers, but can really help them. A lot of you don't know that, for example, my chief financial officer of my company, we went to elementary school together, and here in Cleveland, he's a Clevelander. My chief operating officer, I went to high school with, Clevelander. And let me tell you, some of the things that I come to them with, they would say I'm absolutely nuts. The first time I told them we were going to be official partners of the NBA, they thought I was nuts. When I said that we were going to be official partners of the American Hockey League, they thought I was nuts. All those things came to happen. But you have to understand that the risk takers will have a vision of a future that may not make sense, but it's up to some of these others to help them. I hope that.
Yeah. No, I think, Doug, that's a great point. You need an adult in the room at times. And I think success, I've seen success comes when you have people with complementary capabilities. You need the detailed person if you're not detailed. You need a team that has differing skills and specialities. I'm very fortunate. The team I've got is exceptional, and they're all very complementary skill sets, whether it's in business development or product strategy. And you do need someone, you need to build a team that's not all like you. I think that's probably one of the major mistakes. Some people, you have a tendency to pick people like yourself. That can be really, that's the wrong thing. You want to make sure you've got complementary sets. The other thing I was going to say, sort of as a couple of sort of final thoughts, I think for healthcare and medical, I think that the startup ecosystem is incredibly exciting. I think energy is another area, whether it be solid state batteries and the current transformation away from sort of petrochemical. I think the nuance is it's very easy to be focused on technology, but don't lose sight of the patient outcome. Or, this is the greatest technology, but if it doesn't help a patient, or what's the point? There's no point. We've all seen that. And the last thing, I think a close friend of mine reminded me sort of kind of over the Christmas break, he said to me, the value proposition and the story behind whatever you're selling, okay, it should be so compelling that you come home and you tell your husband, your wife, your spouse, your significant other about. So if you're talking about something, always be reminded that value proposition as you relate to your audience, it should be so compelling you go, oh my God, when you come home that night, you're going to tell someone about that story. That's impactful. And I think that makes the difference. So that's probably I'd like to end with.
Excellent, Glenn. Now, every week I open it up to some of you to, it's not every day you can talk to an investor, a venture capitalist. Is there any questions maybe some of you have, or any thoughts that from this conversation resonates with you? There's no Ducati owners out there, are there?
Yes. What kind of Ducati have you got? Or are you just going to ask me a question?
Yeah, I have a question. So, my friend and I, we have we're starting up a small business, a tennis racket restraining business, and we're going to be pitching to some investors as part of this Pathfinder program for Oberlin. I'm just wondering if you have any advice about what are the core parts of your business that you should be presenting to investors to make sure that you have a solid and effective value proposition.
Okay, really good question. I think the first one is it's kind of like why is the solution you're offering differentiated from X and Y? So in what manner are you going to be unique in the whatever business you're pursuing? So is it easily copied? And where do you see a pathway of them getting a return on their investment? So the first thing is how are you going to be different? Is it going to be a tech-enabled service? Is it going to be where they make appointments on their phone that makes this whole thing so much easier, and then they can track the progress of when they can pick up their racket? Is it going to be delivered through a service provider, so they just drop it off, and then they get it back in the mail? So how are you going to be different, and why is this brings about a change that people will then go, I want to use your service? So what's the differentiatable characteristic? And again, it's coming back for impactful. Why? They want to come home. You really want to be able to pitch them that they come home and say, oh my God, you won't believe this. I heard this business. They're going to do something to change the way that people now get their rackets. I can't believe that. I don't know why anyone hasn't thought of that before. That's the secret.
Good question. Any others? Okay, great. It's a 118er here, Glenn. This is one of my students.
Sweet.
Did you always see yourself as an investor, and how did your career path like really lead you here to this point?
Oh, that's a good one. No, not really. That's the answer to that one, very truthfully. I think if I think back to when I was at university, it was like, I liked healthcare. I wanted to work something in science, and so it's been a journey. And sometimes I've gone, I don't want to do that. So I've kind of figured that one out, what you don't want to do. I can't say I really enjoy meetings per se. So I've, much to my team's dismay, I want to spend time talking about what they want to solve, not presenting me the information that they want me to, So we often do, like pre-reading beforehand, and then focus the time spent together on what are we trying to solve for, or you only get 5 slides and woe betide you if you put any more up there. So because I think we waste a lot of time on meetings as a culture, and then people spend time creating the material for the meeting. So you have the pre-meeting to have the pre-meeting to have the meeting. I mean, wow, how unproductive could a human species be? That's probably the thing I would love. But no, I think it was a journey, and for me, there was always a sense I wanted to build something. So that's how. So directly building your own business or helping people build theirs, I think I like the building. There we are.
Thank you.
Great question. Okay, we got another one. Yeah.
Have there been times in your career where you've taken a risk and it didn't exactly pan out well? And then how did you use that experience to grow as an investor?
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, is the answer to that one. Absolutely. And that can be sometimes, you join a company and it just doesn't pan out. Maybe they lose funding. And then all of a sudden you look around, you go, well, my contract's been cancelled. Okay, so, no funding. What do I need to do? They're always harrowing. I think in the economy today, I think there are a lot of individuals who are also, unfortunately, they're being scaled back or laid off. I think that's the most frightening thing anyone can go through. And that's, it's horrendous. So then you've got to think, okay, what do I need to do? And I think it's all about, leveraging your relationships. I think LinkedIn is not the answer to everything, but it's an amazing, I've had some amazing opportunities that arose from conversations. But at the end of that, I think people buy from people. So it's important that the relationships that you create, during university and postgrad, and your working career, they really do stay with you and lifelong. And sometimes that can mean the difference between finding a different opportunity.
Now, I want to jump in on this one for my own personal life experience too. Look, anytime you put time, money, and effort into something, that's an investment. So first of all, there's, as Glenn had mentioned, there's aspects of life that in college, it's easy to say, I'm going to get straight A's and be a 4.0. But we all know that for a lot of us, circumstances will happen that may prevent that. Life works similarly. You have to set expectations for yourself and margin for error for failure. I mean that not just from just business-wise. I mean in your relationships, in your life, with siblings, with your parents. There are times that you will mean well, and you may prove that you may not be your best in that moment, but it's all about understanding that this happens, and it's about taking the steps or actions after that that you learn from that. I mean, one thing I'll expect of any 118er, you can make a mistake once, but that's it. You pivot, you learn from it, and never do that again, and you will have a great life. I hope that helps give some context as well.
Thank you.
Okay, I have to be respectful of everyone's times, and Glenn, your time. My friend, we're out of time. So
Hey, thanks. That was a pleasure today. I really, again, I wish you all in your journey. More than happy to converse with anyone. If you want to email me, I'm more than happy to have a conversation. And Douglas, it's always a pleasure to support you and what you're doing. You're making a huge impact to an incredible amount of people, and that means a lot, I think.
thank you, Glenn. With that, all of you, I really appreciate your time, effort, and investment in this series to make the Oberlin community make the world better. We've explored all kinds of topics under the sun, crypto, AI. We've been talking about all kinds of things. Next week is our last guest, official guest. We will be bringing Sarah Letterman, who is an impact investor. She invests in socially conscious related topics here. And then the last session, actually, Ted Evans, our head of entrepreneurship, is going to interview yours truly as to my journey to entrepreneurism and some of the things I'm doing. Glenn, look, man, you're my guy. It's always a pleasure. Thank you for contributing your thoughts and wisdom to the Oberlin community to help us make the world better. And I hope to see you soon back out in the Bay, my friend.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. Have a great weekend.
Bye-bye.